Okay, we're gonna spawn up a simple Python web server. Now, this is a built-in web server. Is built in within Python. There will be times where you would like to launch Python scripts within your web browser, where you want to just test some code within your browser, um, and you don't want to go through the complexities of configuring Apache or some other web server to test some Python code. Um, so from here, you can just launch a terminal, type in a few commands, and you have the Python web server up and running. But for me personally, I like to create a script, and within that script, I can add some more options and such. I can specify index or a home folder or a home file. So I prefer to create a script for that. So what we're going to do, we're going to create two files. We're going to create one file to house the configuration for the web server, and another file will just going to be a simple index.py file. Okay, so I'm going to do all this from the terminal. So I'm going to launch my terminal, and I keep all of my code within a folder called sites. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to create a directory called test python, and I'm going to cd into it. And as you can see, there's nothing in it, it's blank, just created. So I'm going to use Vim as my text editor, and I'm going to create the configuration file for the web server. So that will be start web server.py. You can name it anything you like. So from there, I'm going to add the shebang, the required shebang. Oops. That's the path to the Python. I'm going to use environment Python 3. And from here, I'm going to import the required libraries. So from http.server, import CGI HTTP request handler, and also http server. Okay, and then from here I'm going to create a class. Now this class is a simple class. The only thing it's going to do, it's going to specify or actually overwrite the default path, and you can specify whatever path you like. And at this point, I'm just going to specify the root. So basically, I'm going to say when it's kind of like routing, but not as sophisticated as routing. So basically, it's going to say when you hit the root, when you hit www.example.com, I want you to display this file. So you can specify the file as your home file, index file. So that's what this class will do. So you can name it whatever you like. I'm just going to rename request handler. Then you're going to specify a required parameter, which is going to be the CGI request handler. Oops, CGI HTTP request handler. And that's it for that. And then we're going to create a function, or I'm sorry, a method. So as you know, functions are functions. You call them functions if they're not in a class. So we're in a class, so we call them methods. So we're going to create a function, a method. We're going to say do get, and then pass in a parameter, which is self. And we're going to create a conditional if self.path equals the root. Then I want self.path, so it equals index.py, which is going to be, this is my home folder file. And that's after that. I just want to return CGI HTTP request handler dot do underscore get, and that's this guy here, and then with the parameter self. And that's it for this class. So from here, we're just going to create a few more lines. We're going to create a handler, and then we're going to assign that handler to this class that we just created. So request handler, then handler dot CGI. So this is going to be, basically saying, okay, I want this to be the directories. You can specify multiple directories for your CGIs, which is for your Python scripts. So we can just use the root directory, just one directory, but you can specify multiple. So CGI directories equals just the root. Now you can specify multiple by saying my folder and such. You can create it like that, but we only require one for this demo. And then I'm gonna say server equals to http server, and then this takes 3 parameters. It will be, since we're in a development environment, so this is going to be localhost, and the second parameter would be the port. You can specify any port that is currently not in use. And the third one will be the handler, which we created here. So I'm going to say, it's 2 parentheses, localhost, then the port, 8000, and then the handler. Okay, and then we have server dot serve underscore forever. So basically what this command will be doing, it's this file that we're creating, this is a method to launch the built-in Python web server. Now we're going to run it from within the terminal. So as you know, any command that's run in the terminal, at least in this instance, it will remain running until we close the program, and that's called terminate state resident. Basically, when we run it, it's still running, meaning the terminal, you cannot use the terminal unless you open another tab or a different terminal. So you would have to Control C or Control D or completely close the terminal to close or exit out of the application, and so to actually stop the Python web server. So this is basically telling the application to run the server forever until the user, until we decide that we no longer require the server. Okay, so save this file, and then now we're going to create the actual index file. So that'll be our home file that we're going to display on the screen on the web browser. So that'll be vim index.py. So we're going to include the shebang. So that'll be user bin my environment Python 3, and then we're just going to print out the headers as well as HTML tags. So the headers will be basically the content type, what type of content you want to display, right? So we're going to say we want to display HTML, so that's what we're going to provide with the content type. So that's going to be content type, which is text and HTML. And that's it for that. Now this will fail if you create this and you create all the HTML and within this and you provide it, you launch the web server, you probably would get a blank screen because it requires a new line. So you would have to give it a new line. So that's required. If you miss this step here, you would get a blank page, blank content, nothing displayed on the web browser. So from here, let's start printing out the HTML tags. So this would be, what did I do wrong? Oops. So we're going to start printing out the HTML tags. So this would be HTML, this would be head, title, and then test, what do you call it? Let's call it Python test web server. Okay, and we can close out the title, close out the head, and that's it for this section. Let's start the body. So we can say body, and then we can give it a h1. Then we can say the same thing, Python test web server. Close the h1 tag and close the body tag, and lastly close the HTML tag. Okay, and that's it for this file. Save it. Now let's list it. Okay, we have 2 files in here. Now, in order to start this file, this would have to be an executable. Index.py would have to be in an executable, and at this right now it is not. So we're going to change mod and make that into an executable. Now if we run this and look at it, you'll see now it is an executable with X. Okay, so that's that. We should be able to run this by running Python and the name of our configuration file, which is start web server. Okay, start that, and then we specify that it was port 8000, and there we go, Python test web server, and you get some logging here. Now we know it's actually running Python because we ran the print command, and you can see if you go to view page source, you can see that it accepted all the HTML tags that we included. So it's good for HTML. It's not complete HTML, but it's missing the doc type, but that's fine. Let's stop it by pressing Control C. Hit it again and again. Okay, so basically, what's going on here? We can add. Let's just add a date so we can know that it's actually running Python, right? So the browser or the Python web browser or web server is actually can parse or execute Python code. Okay, so let's edit the index.py file. So we're going to add a date to it. So we can do so but in order to add the date, we have to import a library called time. So import time, and let's display it somewhere within the body here. So we can say break, close that out. So we're gonna say ++, right? Because that's breaking out the different code from. It's basically separating the Python's actual syntax from the HTML syntax. Okay, so we're gonna say time, which is a function, and we're gonna provide. Is this gonna be simple? I'm just gonna put today's date, right? So today's date, and it's just %x for today's date, and the time str. Yep, that looks good. And let's just give it some clarity. So today's date space. Okay, that's good, and save that. Start the server. Looks good. And oops, we got an error. %. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it's good to have errors, I guess. What happened here? The date, the %x that requires to be in quotes. There you go. So let's rerun that. Oh boy, what's going on here? Next line 8, CGI script. Okay. Let's look at that, which is this guy here. So I closed that HTML. Time, I'd imported the time. That's good. Time. STF time. Time. Percent. I don't see the issue. So that's plus. I imported the time. All right, let me see. Okay, it was a simple one. It was the parentheses. We have the closing open parenthesis, but we didn't close it out here. So we need a, oops. We have to close it out. There you go. So let's run it again. All right, and holy moly, there's an error here. All right, I see the issue. The issue is the time. This is not a function, so we're gonna extend it. So we gotta get rid of this. Get rid of this guy. That should resolve it. Okay, save it. Rerun. Oh, I'm sorry. We got to start the server. And there you go. Today's date. So it's actually running Python code. So that's pretty much it. So I guess the next lesson I will show you how to actually configure Apache if you want to have a server that's a web server that's always running. We can use Apache, and we can configure Apache to execute Python scripts. And for a side note, I am just, let's look at my version of Python. I'm currently running 3.5.1. Now, the code that I ran here, restart web server, it's going to be slightly different if you're not running 3.5, if you're not running Python 3, version 3. This http server library, it's or the http class from the library, it's not included in, or they just, the name is different basically. In Python 2, you will use simple http server instead of http.server. You would use in one word, camel case, so it'd be simple http server, and then you would import different libraries. But the information is in Python docs. So if you go to the Python's docs, look up their documentation in their website, you can see, you can specify your version, and you can see the way you can do it. It closely resembles the syntax closely resembles each other as far as this and the way you can use the web server. It's just that make sure your version is, if you're using version 3, this shouldn't be a problem. But if you're using version 2, Python version 2, you would have to look up the documentation, and because if you run http.server, it would fail. Okay, and that's it for this lesson. The next lesson I will go over how to configure Apache so it can run and execute Python scripts.